Welcome to Talent Connect, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Sachit, and this is VB. We're both product managers at LinkedIn, and we're super excited to be talking to you today about how to win talent on mobile with LinkedIn. Now, during our day jobs, VB and I work on the LinkedIn Jobs product, and so what we're focused on is helping candidates find their dream opportunities through LinkedIn so that they can accelerate their careers. And for the employers in the room, we're trying to help you find the right employees so that you can accelerate your business plans. So before we get started today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our product philosophy here at LinkedIn. So we believe in a principle called members first. And what I mean by that is that before we go out and build any feature or product, we really ask ourselves, is this in the best interest of our members? If the answer is no, we stop right there. Members first is the reason why, of the thousands and thousands of ideas we have at LinkedIn, only a handful get executed on. It's also the reason why the same members that are coming to LinkedIn to engage with their connections, to look at news and share content, are also responding to your emails and responding to your jobs in meaningful ways. By making our members successful, we end up making our recruiting team successful. And that's why this principle is so important to us. So coming to our topic at hand today, I'm sure there's a few people in the room that remember that this is how you found a job back in the day, right? You opened your local newspaper and you circled the positions that you were interested in. It's almost hard to imagine that this is the way we ever did things. Well, the technology revolution of the internet just swept over this industry, and suddenly you put your newspaper away and you started typing in a few keywords and searching through thousands and thousands of positions all at once. Well, I'm here to tell you that the next technological revolution is upon us. More and more, what we're seeing is that candidates are moving to mobile devices like never before. And in some ways, it makes sense when it comes to job search. Now, job searching happens to be a very private activity. You want to do it discreetly. You don't want your boss finding out that you're looking for a job. The mobile form factor makes that incredibly easy. It's actually incredible when you look at some of the trends that are happening in the mobile industry. The United Nations recently put out a statement where they said that they expect there to be more mobile cell phone subscriptions on the planet than people. Which kind of begs the question, right? Who are these people that are carrying more than one cell phone in their pockets? I'm sure there's a few of you in this room. Don't worry, you can keep your cell phones. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. When you actually look at the trend behind this, it's pretty interesting. The yellow line represents the population on the planet, and the red line represents cell phone subscriptions. As you can see, it's not a fair contest right now. The day when cell phones outnumber people is upon us this year. What's also interesting about this trend is that we're seeing the same trend on LinkedIn. Now, we're a data-driven company, and we have the benefit of the historical perspective. So back in 2010, we started working on mobile optimizing our jobs experience on LinkedIn. At that time, we had less than 1% of people, 1% of LinkedIn members, looking for jobs through mobile devices. Fast forward to this month, and that number is over 30%. 30% of LinkedIn members are clicking on jobs through their mobile phones. If you actually fast forward this trend to next year, we expect more than half of our audience coming in through mobile. That's just incredible. Now, I'm not usually a betting man, but we are in Vegas. So if anybody would like to bet against this trend, come see me after the session. I may just have to put a wager on it. Now, we've also been talking to the employers that use LinkedIn, and we've tried to understand some of the attitudes that employers have towards mobile recruiting. And it's somewhat interesting because many of you have started working on mobile optimizing career sites. By the way, just a quick show of hands. Do you offer your candidates a mobile optimized career site today? Yeah, definitely a few of you in the room. Well, it turns out that 1 in 5 employers is doing this today. But what was even more interesting about the data that we collected through the survey was that less than 1% of employers are offering a mobile-friendly apply process, right? So all this traffic, all these candidates engaging, and less than 1% of them can apply in a mobile-friendly way. So let's talk a little bit about these candidates, right? Who are these people, and why should you care about them? Well, again, LinkedIn being data-driven, we started collecting some data on this. Turns out that more than 3/4 of these candidates are highly passive, the same kind of high-quality candidates that you want to attract to your jobs. So they're more like the people that you see in this image, people that are waiting at a bus stop and engaging with 1 or 2 opportunities at a time, rather than applying to hundreds of jobs, which some people do on the web. The other interesting data point we collected on this audience was that nearly 60% of them are not engaging with jobs on a desktop device. That's their primary computer. That's the only way that they access jobs, is through a mobile device. So an incredibly important segment that has just shown up out of nowhere. We also try to understand some of the attitudes that these job seekers have. It was kind of interesting. So there's this millennial job seeker that we spoke to. And what he said is that he's just stopped applying to the employers where the experience is not up to par, because it tells him something about the employer's priorities. What he's talking about there is your career brand. So incredibly important that you can engage with this audience in a meaningful way. So let's talk about what that typical experience is on a mobile phone. If you mobile optimize your career site, then candidates can search through a job listing and find a particular listing like we show here. But once they hit the apply on company website button, what's going to end up happening is, in most cases, except for that 1%, they're going to hit the standard web desktop application tracking system apply flow. Now, I'm sure candidates complain about this even on the web, but take into account the experience on a mobile device, and it's exponentially harder. Now, during this conference, I'm sure many of you will hear the words mobile moment repeated over and over. Let me be very clear. This is not the mobile moment that we're referring to when we say those words. So what can you do about this? How can you make sure that candidates can have a positive experience and meaningful experience on mobile? So here at LinkedIn, we're always thinking about ways in which we can make this technological transformation easier on our customers. And so we've come up with 3 steps to success with mobile jobs. Diving in, the first step is really optimizing every single candidate touch point for mobile. What we mean by this is not just the career site, but all of the different ways that candidates are engaging with you on mobile devices. I'm going to dive in detail in just a second. The second step is to really rethink how candidates respond. Now, we've already talked about the desktop application flow, and we know that it's just not practical on a mobile device. So what can you do about this? We explore that question as well. And finally, it's really important to understand that recruiting is still about people, right? It doesn't matter all of the technological changes that are happening around us. You're not going to be successful unless you empower your team. And so we talk about some ways you can do that. Let's start with step 1, which is optimizing candidate touchpoints for mobile. So yes, you should start with the career site, but what's really important to realize is that you simply can't just take the desktop experience and port it to a mobile device. That's a recipe for failure. What you really need to do is look at the behaviors that candidates have while they're on the go. What are those job seekers that are waiting at that bus stop? What do they want to do? So Google's a great example where they've taken the experience that they have on the web and really focused on the things that people want to do on the go. So all they offer candidates when they engage with them on mobile devices is simply a way to search for a job and then engage with it, nothing else. That's a great place to start. The second step here is to really understand that less is more when it comes to job descriptions. Now, a lot of research needs to go into what's the ideal length of a job description on a mobile device, but suffice it to say that starting with a concise description is the right way to go, especially given the small amount of real estate that a candidate has on a mobile device. The third step is to do something that we're always doing on our mobile phones. We're checking emails several times a day. I saw many of you checking your emails while you were waiting for the session to start. Well, your candidates are doing the same thing. And that's why mobile optimizing email communication will pay a lot of benefits. Now, many of you will agree that email happens to be a subject where LinkedIn is sort of an expert. And one of the things that we've started doing is that we've started mobile optimizing every single email that we send out. So the experience that you see on a desktop device when you open an email is very different from what you see when you open it on your mobile phone. And the reason for that is that we see a tremendous boost in engagement when we mobile optimize email. So here's an example of an email that is not mobile optimized. So a recruiter is reaching out to a candidate, and as you can see, that email is a little long. So if this candidate has just a few seconds to engage, what's going to end up happening is that he's probably going to turn off the email. So what can you do about this? How can you make sure that candidates are going to engage with that email in a meaningful way? Well, one place to start is to write short sentences, short paragraphs. An eye-catching subject goes a long way, especially if it fits on a single line on a mobile device. At the end of the day, you have to make every word count. And the reason that this is important is that nearly 45% of all email that LinkedIn sends out, and by the way, we definitely send out our fair share of email, is open on a mobile device. Right? So this is nearly half the candidates that are engaging on mobile devices first through email. The second step in our 3 steps to success is to really rethink how candidates respond. Now, we've already talked about the desktop application tracking system, ApplyFlow. And we know that those dozens of fields that candidates are required to fill out just do not translate to the mobile experience. So first thing to do is to really reduce the number of fields that you're asking from candidates. Just figure out what the least common denominator is. What's the minimum set of fields that it's going to take for your team to know whether somebody's a good fit or not? Beyond this, you can automate with tools that are widely available. LinkedIn makes several free plugins that are available that can pre-fill a lot of the data that you need with profile data. There are also other free tools that are available that can do the same thing with resumes. So try to pre-fill as much as possible. The last step here is to really allow candidates to raise their hand. Treat the mobile application as lead generation. Now that's something that marketers have figured out very early on, and it's something that I think is relevant for recruiting as well. If you allow candidates, if you allow your team to engage with these candidates based on the minimal set of data that they've submitted, you're going to get better results when it comes to mobile. Now, the reason this is important is that less than 1% of your competition for top talent is offering a mobile-friendly ApplyFlow today. So you can get out there and get ahead of the competition by doing this. Step 3, when it comes to successful mobile jobs, is to really empower your team. And what that means is to really transform your recruiting culture. Tell your recruiters why this is important. Share some of that data. Make that strong case that this is important. And the time is now that you need to start doing this. Now, a lot of this starts with retraining your team on the best practices. It means that you have to train them on how to write mobile-friendly emails. It also means training them about when to engage with candidates based on the mobile applications that they've submitted. And then finally, none of this is going to be possible in a vacuum. You have to lobby your organization, try to get those IT resources, the executive sponsorship that you need to be successful. Now, that's not going to be easy. Now, at LinkedIn, we've had a unique problem. In the last couple of years that I've been with the company, we've grown from about 1,000 people to about 4,500. And so we've really had to innovate when it comes to our recruiting processes. I've been supporting the recruiting team, trying to help scale the company. And some of the best practices we've adopted when it comes to mobile are as follows. One of the ways that we really engage candidates through mobile is through text messaging. Now, this is a nearly free feature. Every single one of you has this capability. What we do is we send updates to candidates about their interview schedules. We send them weather updates, even traffic updates on the day of the interview. This is a great way for you to engage the mobile job seekers. The second thing that we also do is that every candidate that comes into LinkedIn gets an iPad. And this is preloaded with information about the people that they're meeting, their LinkedIn profiles. So every time that they have a few minutes between interviews, they can review that information, see what they have in common with those people. In addition, we also preload the device with videos and other content that signifies the LinkedIn career brand. So just another way in which you can really engage your candidates through mobile and show that you're a forward-thinking recruiting company. Now, we understand that a lot of this technological transformation that's happening isn't easy to adjust to. right? It's hard to make this leap. So at LinkedIn, we're always thinking about what are the products and services that we can offer your teams so that you can make this transformation in as frictionless a way as possible. And that's what my colleague VB is going to talk about next.
All right. Thanks, Sachit. I see a bunch of you in the audience using their phones. I bet you're looking at jobs right now. All right, so my name is VB, and I'm part of the product team at LinkedIn. And working really closely with Sachit, we spend day and night thinking about how can we build features that not only attract our users, but also deliver value to each of you, our customers. Mobile is really changing the way recruiting happens, and we are all aware of that. So today, I'm here to walk you through a suite of products that we have been building at LinkedIn that we believe can make this transformation easier for you. So I'm sure the slide is very familiar to you by now. This is our way of thinking about being successful in the mobile world. It starts with the very basics. You got to make sure that when candidates engage with your talent brand, with your career sites, they are mobile optimized. Luckily, at LinkedIn, we practice what we preach. So as we talk about the suite of products we have built, we'll be referring back to the same slide and talking about how we can do this one step at a time. So with LinkedIn, your company's brand comes mobile optimized. We have taken each of the over 3 million companies on LinkedIn and given them a presence in our iOS as well as the Android app. In addition, each of those company pages are mobile optimized in the mobile web experience as well. Candidates have an opportunity to follow your company, and by following your company, they're really raising their hand and asking to hear from you. As folks scroll down the page, they can see open job opportunities at your company. So in this case, it feels like New York Times has a project manager job that would be quite suitable for me. So after the conference, I think I'm going to try and take a look at that job. Well, the moment I just had here right now happens millions and millions of times on LinkedIn. Just in the last month, we had over 10 million company page views. Think of these as 10 million opportunities for you to engage passive candidates with your company's brand. We didn't just stop at optimizing your company page. We did the same for your jobs. So each of the jobs you have posted with us at LinkedIn is accessible in a mobile optimized fashion across all devices and all platforms. Members and candidates can save these jobs if they deem so. Besides just mobile optimizing these jobs, we wanted to make them really discoverable in our mobile experience. So we have added them to the news feed. So as I'm sure a lot of you have experienced here, you're on your LinkedIn mobile app and you're engaging with news, you're seeing what your professional network is up to, and you see these targeted recommendations that make you want to click. I have certainly clicked on a number of these jobs, and I'm sure folks in the audience have done so as well. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but you know who you are. Data shows that we're getting over 25 million job views happening on our mobile devices every month. And this represents over 30% of total job views that happen on LinkedIn. So roughly 30% of jobs engagement for you guys is already coming on mobile at LinkedIn. Yeah, we could address that in the Q&A.
Just curious, that's US or global numbers?
Yeah, so in some countries, it's actually closer to like 40 and 50%. So you can imagine like countries like Singapore, Australia, where folks tend to really engage and embrace modern technologies, this number is actually higher. In the US, I think it's slightly lower than 30%. By the way, yeah, feel free to ask questions. We want this session to be as engaging and as useful for you as possible. So talking about making your jobs discoverable, in addition to having jobs show up in the newsfeed, jobs also show up on your employee profiles. So some of you may be using this ad product that we call Work With Us, where we convert your employee profiles to act as talent ambassadors for your company. We've heard time and again that employee referrals are the #1 source of quality hires. And this is exactly what this product does. So Juliana is a friend of mine who works at Pinterest. And I'm looking at her profile to learn more about her background and to connect with her. As I scroll down her profile, I see this call to action that prompts me to work with Juliana at Pinterest. And if I click on that button, I'll be taken to a list of targeted job recommendations that match my background. Yeah, you're absolutely right. For folks who already have the desktop ad, the mobile ad would become available. So this is really the secret sauce of LinkedIn. You know, a lot of the folks who are on LinkedIn, they aren't actively searching for jobs. They are some of the most highly qualified passive talent that's out there. So with products like these, we are making sure that passive candidates are exposed to your talent brand and your jobs in the context of mobile devices. In addition to passive candidates, we haven't forgotten about the active candidates either. Increasingly, LinkedIn is becoming the #1 source of qualified active candidates. And with that in mind, we've launched Job Search on the phone. So today, if you pull up your iOS, Android, or mobile web experience, you'll be able to search for jobs on the go. We launched this feature just a few months ago, and the response has been phenomenal. We're already doing over 5 million job searches every month. So just think about the volume and the scale that you get with LinkedIn Mobile. So we have talked a little bit about optimizing your talent brand, optimizing your jobs, making those jobs discoverable as part of the day-to-day activities of LinkedIn members. And that helps us cover our bases, making sure that anytime a candidate is interacting with your brand on our platform, they have a great experience. But what happens next? What if a candidate is interested? How can we make it really easy and simple for them to respond and apply for your job opportunity? As many of you know, mobile is different. Most mobile devices don't support a file system, which makes it really hard to upload or edit a resume or a cover letter. Luckily for us at LinkedIn, we have the advantage of the LinkedIn profile, which is increasingly becoming the professional profile of record. So we have devised a mobile application flow that takes just the LinkedIn profile and allows a candidate to apply. So let's just go over the flow and see what it looks like. A lot of jobs will have this apply button. And if you're interested in applying for this job, you can simply hit apply, which takes you to the next screen where you have an opportunity to review your profile. If you want to update something, we have a super slick, mobile-optimized profile edit experience. But if everything looks good, you can simply hit next. At this stage, candidates can verify their email address and their phone number. We have heard from recruiters that email and phone number are 2 key pieces of information you need to reach back to a candidate. So we wanted to give candidates an extra opportunity to make sure they got the contact information right. If everything looks good, you can hit submit. So in 15 to 30 seconds, I've applied to a job in a really simple mobile optimized fashion. Sorry, go ahead.
That works in 2 clicks if you have your job set up to apply on LinkedIn, right? Because our jobs are, I'm with Cisco, our
Right.
jobs are set up to apply back on our company webpage.
Right.
And while we have some CRM type technology to create talent communities, would it be possible for that and the LinkedIn mobile app to communicate in some way so
Yeah.
we could do that process on LinkedIn? Or
Yeah, so I'll just repeat the question just so everyone knows. So the question in this case is, does this process work if I'm collecting applications on my ATS? So I think the answer to that is yes. We have devised an API that ATS providers can use to integrate with our system. So yeah, you could help us by reaching back to your ATS and asking for the mobile apply.
I wasn't sure, but you do have an API available that we can test?
Yes, yeah. Go on. Yeah. So the question was, what if we want candidates to submit extra information? For example, IDEO requires them to maybe submit a portfolio of their work. And I think the way we are thinking of mobile is that mobile is truly different. You just cannot take a desktop apply process and put it on mobile. But mobile can be a great way to generate leads for your jobs. So think of it as the first step in the funnel where the candidate is able to apply with their LinkedIn profile. And a lot of candidates have added their portfolios on LinkedIn these days, including Rich Media. And if you think the candidate looks good based on their initial work, you can reach back to them and ask for more information. So getting back to the presentation, we've devised a really simple application flow, takes just a few clicks, and this is live on the site right now. And over the past few weeks, we have seen an increase in the number of applications that are coming on mobile. As of this morning, we are processing close to 500,000 applications on mobile every month. This is happening right now. These are applications LinkedIn is processing on behalf of some of you through our mobile devices.
And again, these are global numbers, not US specific?
These are all global numbers. So, sorry, go on.
How do you balance this with the compliance piece? So usually you need to have questions so candidates can still select out, or that on the flip side, you as the recruiter can select or screen candidates out. If they're just putting their name and address in, how are you using any kind of criteria to screen them?
Yeah, so the question here is, what about compliance questions? A lot of those which are sometimes legally required. I think the way we are thinking about it at LinkedIn is really that apply on mobile is different. And can we start to treat it as a lead gen? Instead of calling it a legal application, can this be considered the first step in the funnel? Do you really need candidates to fill out 20 different fields before you even consider them? Or can you consider them based on their profile and their contact information and reach back out to them for the additional information if you need that? Does that answer your question? Yeah. So again, mobile applications are happening today on LinkedIn. When we were here last year at this conference talking about mobile, we talked about mobile as the future. Well, that's not the case anymore. Mobile is increasingly our present, and we all need to be prepared to handle it. So going back to our three-step process, we just talked about step 2, making it really simple for candidates to apply in the mobile world. What about step 3? which is really about empowering your team, giving your recruiting team the tools they need to be successful in the mobile world. Well, we have something really special for you here, but we can't talk about it just yet. It's so special that we invite you to join us for the keynote tomorrow for the big reveal. I think the keynote is early in the morning. It's about 8 or 9, but I promise it's worth waking up. You won't be disappointed. So the big question that must be in your minds is, how much is this going to cost, right? Well, you must be thinking, great, LinkedIn PMs come on stage, talk about how mobile is changing the world in recruiting, and talk about a bunch of products that they have worked on, and now they want us to buy it. So any guesses on how much this is going to cost? Yes. At LinkedIn, we recognize that your recruiting budgets are stretched thin. And oftentimes, recruiting doesn't even fall to the top of the list when budget allocations are made. At LinkedIn, we think that mobile is not a nice to have, it's a must have. So all of our mobile offerings that we talked about today are available completely free of cost for customers with whom we have a desktop relationship. Well, in these days, a free lunch is really hard to come by, but I hope you'll agree that we come pretty close. Thank you. And we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah. Why don't we actually use this microphone, if you guys could? Yeah. That way we don't have to repeat it and everybody else can hear it.
I can pass it around after too if you guys prefer.
How's it going? I'm just trying to get a sense that you quoted some numbers in the beginning. It was like 50% are using, mobile for jobs or to whatnot. Is that? But then you also said only 5 million users are actually searching LinkedIn. So how much of that 50% is, I'm getting a message, come work for me, versus, actually proactively going on your mobile device and searching?
Yeah. So maybe the best way to frame that is the number is actually 30% today. 50% is a projection for the future.
Okay.
So Talent Connect 2014, you can try to see if we actually hit that number.
Sure.
So off the 30%, most of that engagement that we're seeing is actually passive candidates who are clicking on recommendations that we make.
Okay.
5 million is the number of active searches where people are actually going in, typing in a keyword, and searching from their mobile phone. So that kind of explains the discrepancy in the numbers that you noticed.
Okay.
So good job noticing that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think a lot of the engagement on LinkedIn is very different from the engagement you see on traditional job boards. In traditional job boards, you have active candidates who are doing 5, 10, 15 different searches. On LinkedIn, most of the jobs engagement is driven by recommendations. These are passive candidates who are encountering your targeted jobs as part of the day-to-day LinkedIn experience. So even though the number of searches might seem small, the total number of views you're getting is much higher because of the passive candidates.
How is your relationships going with the applicant tracking systems? The reason I ask is I'm assuming a lot of them are probably rolling out very similar products native within their platforms. So can you kind of talk to that and also talk to what would be involved with homegrown ATS or built yourself?
Yeah, so we think of ATSs as our partners. I think LinkedIn has partnered with a number of ATSs. I think probably like most of the top ATSs are our partners, and we are working with them to build in some of the apply processes such that candidates are able to apply in a seamless fashion on LinkedIn, yet recruiters are able to process those applications in their ATS systems. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you'll agree that whenever integrations are involved, it does take a little bit of time. And so we are trying to make that case with our ATS partners, who we have relationships with over the last several years, to adopt the API that we've already built.
Yeah, so I think the question was asking Taleo specifically, like maybe a timeline on when they might be integrated. And I think we have these APIs that are open and available. It's really up to the ATS partners, and more importantly, it's up to the clients and the customers, which is all of you guys. If all of you ask for it, then Taleo will build it.
Help us help you is what he's saying.
You mentioned that you should use mobile as a generation gatherer and maybe not an application processor, more or less. And then you talked about having a separate apply process for mobile versus desktop almost. Aren't you creating more work for yourself if you do it that way? I mean, you're going to have mobile applicants, or mobile candidates, I guess you're going to call them, and then you're going to have desktop applicants. I mean, and then when people come in for an interview, you're going to have to sit someone down at a computer. Well, you have to finish the rest of our application process when you come in, or some other later stage. It just seems to me you're creating a lot of extra work if you go that route.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I think the best way to answer that is that nearly 50% of candidates in the future will engage on mobile devices. The question is it valuable for you to at least have the lead, or is it more valuable to have a completed application? That's a decision that you and your recruiting teams are going to have to make.
Yeah, so I think what we are seeing is that among the 30% candidates today who are on mobile, almost 60% of them haven't seen a single job on desktop over the past 6 months. So this is a whole new set of audience that you're missing out on if you don't have an application process for them. And I think it does add a little bit more complexity on the recruiting teams, but it's a trade-off between either we completely miss out on this fresh talent pool, or we change our processes a little bit and make them flexible to adapt for this new change.
I totally agree with you on that. I just wouldn't recommend two different processes. I mean, what we did in our company is we just streamlined the whole application process as much as we can, but we're still collecting 30 data points. On a mobile device, it takes about 15 minutes to complete the entire application process. Is it a long time? Sure, but having two different processes, I just don't it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, in last year we hired 15,000 people through mobile. This year, about 20% of our overall hires are coming through mobile, and about 15% of our traffic on our web is mobile. So we're actually trending more higher on mobile hires. I just wouldn't recommend doing two different processes.
Did you say it takes 15 minutes for a candidate to complete an application?
Yes.
Yeah. When was the last time you actually spent 15 minutes on a single task on mobile?
Well, I mean, we're having thousands of people do it in a week. Again, if you make it, the problem that you have, especially if you're a large company and you have thousands of applications out there, if you make it 1, 2, 3 click, you have thousands of candidates you got to filter through. I mean, and then half of them are passive and half of them aren't really interested. I don't know, if I'm applying for a job, asking someone to spend 10 to 15 minutes in completing it, I don't know if that's too much to ask. I get each company's got to do that on their own, but I don't think 15 minutes out of someone's time to apply for a job is out of bounds.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's really a question of different industries, different company sizes, how competitive is your talent pool. So, obviously you want to be able to sort through the candidates in a fast fashion. And to that end, at LinkedIn, if you choose to collect applications within our recruiter product, we actually sort the applicants in the order of perceived importance. So, we are making it really easy for candidates to apply, but at the same time, we're making it really easy for recruiters to go through that candidate pool and look at the most important candidates first. That's one. The second thing is, I think, just really about the competitiveness of the candidate pool. I think in a lot of industries, if an application requires 15 minutes, a passive candidate is just going to be like, you know what, I'm not going to do it. But you're absolutely right. In some cases, folks might be willing to go and spend that 15 minutes on the mobile device.
Hi. So my question is, in terms of your data on the new types of people applying through mobile, of those applying, is there any data around how many of those were hired by the company? And then also on the types of the candidates are applying, are they mostly tech background candidates, or are they business type, or is it a mix? I think eventually, I'm assuming it'll be across the board, but for the initial points right now, who are they? and are they being hired?
So if I just repeat your question, I think what you're asking is, of the people that are applying through mobile, how many of those have actually been hired, right? That's the question. So we launched our mobile apply application flow, what, 2 months ago?
A couple of months ago. And we looked at the quality of applicants, and we take that pretty seriously because when we're simplifying the process, we want to make sure that we are still delivering value to you and to your jobs. And when we look at the applicant quality, the quality on mobile was actually on par to desktop. When we looked at the exact numbers, the quality on mobile came out to be slightly higher than the quality on desktop, but it wasn't statistically significant. But you're absolutely right. I mean, quality is something that we continue to monitor, but based on what we have seen so far over the past 2 or 3 months, the quality is actually on par with desktop.
Yeah, and then in terms of hires, it typically does take a few months for someone to go through the process and go through the interview process and then come back to LinkedIn and update their profile, which is when we know that that they've been hired. And so it's definitely data that we will look at very closely. It's still early days yet.
I have a product recommendation, and I apologize if you guys are already doing it, but I have not found it. The Save Job feature is valuable, and lots of candidates we know save jobs and never go through the apply process for all the reasons we've been talking about. It would be nice if we at a company can see who has saved our jobs and see that either in Recruiter or Message those folks, because many of them drop off, lose interest, never go through to apply. And that's a useful candidate universe for companies to know who had at least enough interest to read a job and then save it.
Yeah, that's definitely a request that we hear quite a lot. There are definitely data privacy issues when it comes to that subject, right? Because in many ways, the candidate has saved it as a private action for themselves. Sharing that back with the employer does come with a bit of baggage, right? There are ways in which we try to get the candidate to engage and then go ahead and finish an application. We do send them reminders and other ways in terms of trying to get them to engage. But you're right that it's a hard problem to solve.
So 2 questions on the follow-up of the gentleman. If you save it as, with a LinkedIn Recruiter license, you can see who's viewed your position as long as their preferences are allowing them to,
Yeah, so we don't actually show you exactly who viewed a job.
Okay.
You may notice that we say one of these people viewed your job.
Sure.
And again, the reason for that is data privacy. And it all goes back to the member first principle, which I first talked about.
And then the second question is, you started to talk a little bit about implementing text messaging strategy to who's following you. Can you go a little bit into that in terms of how you can implement that and
You mean the text messaging strategy I talked about from the LinkedIn recruiting team?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't send it out to followers, but we engage with candidates that are coming in to interview. So that's the stage at which we start engaging them with text messaging.
Is that available for all LinkedIn Recruiter?
We don't use any special tools for it. We use
So
AT&T
you're
or
just
Sprint.
taking your phone and texting them directly? Okay.
Yeah, it's out of the box. Any of you can do it today.
My question's kind of touching on a lot of the different things, and it goes back to the compliance and especially the EEO elements. My company, very conservative, large, dealing with a lot of applications, and the trick is once it becomes an application versus a lead, the total rules change.
Yep.
So is there a way that this could be modified or adapted so it is purely a lead collector, whether it's this, in a kind of a hybrid of apply for a job and save the job so that it can be captured in a folder and recruiters could then, go back out to them? Is there any way to customize it on that level? Because, as I said, once you get to the apply process, the rules completely change, at least from my vantage point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, that's a great question, and that's something that we hear from employers all the time. I think the way we are trying to lay out the groundwork is, if you have a complicated apply process on mobile, the best of your candidates will not engage, right? I mean, if you are happily employed and maybe you just had a bad day at work you may consider applying for a different job if it's really easy that night, right? And I think that's the real value proposition of LinkedIn, is that you're getting access to passive candidates that you just don't exist anywhere else. I think if we make the apply process, 10 different fields, 15 minutes long, it truly breaks down this value proposition of passive candidates. That said, I'm very totally understand the point around requiring a lot of internal approvals to make the shift to a really simple process and yet call it an apply. I think in some of the applications we're collecting today are on behalf of many of you, where companies have been able to convince management, convince their legal teams that, look, it's okay for us to accept a lead into our application system. And then once that person is good and qualified and we bring them in on site, that's when we can have them fill out the EEO forms and everything else we need them to.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think what you're saying is, what if you call it something other than application, right? Exactly. Yeah, we're definitely considering that as well.
Yeah, so that is actually my question is about, which is that from the candidate experience, they think they've applied if you what you showed today. So have you thought about how that plays with the candidate? Have you had candidates who say, but I already applied, or any of the other things that you could imagine by using this as lead generation as opposed to formal legal application?
Right.
I'd like to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so that's a fair point. Again, from a candidate perspective, they have applied. So all of these applications that we're collecting today actually show up in Recruiter as applicants. So I think the application versus lead gen is a terminology issue. Fundamentally, we're talking about the same thing. That's a very fair point.
Let's try to keep the lawyers out of this one.
So I think that's totally the transformation we're talking about, is that should our legal teams prevent us from offering the best possible recruiting experience to our potential candidates? It's hard to convince the lawyers that we have in our organization, but it can be done.
Yeah, and we should say that we're very early days when it comes to a mobile apply flow. We are considering all of these issues, and we'll continue to iterate and improve the product as we go forward.
As you look at the data that comes through the system, do you take a look at the data that differentiates people that may be coming for the first time as opposed to people that may be linked into employees and your company profile page?
So you're asking about mobile apply, or are you talking about?
Yes, mobile. I would imagine, as we talk about all of the concepts that we talked about, we're talking about differences in whether the person wants to go through the entire process in a mobile fashion, if it's longer. And my guess is that as you look at the data of how they're connected, you see differences.
Sure.
Yeah,
Just wondered
so,
if you had the data.
To be honest, we haven't done an analysis along those lines, but that would be pretty interesting to look at.
Yeah, and the first-time user experience is a little different. When somebody applies for a job for the first time, we do allow them to update their profile and make that front and center in the process. It does change the second time you apply, because you don't want to have to go through the same steps all over again. Other questions?
Sounds like we all have great ideas. Is there a way to get those to you guys? Is there a site or an email, or do we just tell our reps? What's the best way to get product ideas to you guys for mobile specifically?
Yeah, so there is actually a products page on LinkedIn. If you look through the products tab of the LinkedIn company page, we're all listed there. And you can send us an email or a free message. I'm on the Open Link network, so it won't cost you anything.
Yeah, and we're also collecting feedback at the end of the session, so feel free to come talk to us. We're always looking to hear from you guys, in terms of how we can improve the product. So yeah, please feel free.
Sorry, I just have one quick question.
Let's get you a microphone.
So you've talked about the candidate experience from a mobile recruiting perspective. What about from a recruiter's perspective? Have you looked into getting a LinkedIn Recruiter app?
Yeah, we're always thinking about ways in which we can improve the recruiting workflow as well. So we are considering what are some ways in which we can solve that problem. We do realize that recruiters are on the go as well, just like job seekers.
Yeah.
And so we are considering that class of problems as well.
Yeah, I guess I've experienced this issue. Obviously, I'm from Australia. Trying to respond to candidates that I've been, communicating with on Recruiter. Trying to do that on my tiny Safari app on the mobile is quite difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you've got ideas, come tell us, because we are thinking about this class of problems. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you for listening to us, and we're going to stay here for a few minutes if you have other comments or questions for us.
Thank you.